Do we?
I see you did a segment on that. I want
to
talk more about conference trajectory. Like, where do you see in the next 2 years? Where do you see conferences rising? Do you see it still being about the same, or do you see any movement in that pecking order?
All right. So the SEC, everything points in the right direction for the SEC for one huge reason, and that's because they have the most football players playing high school football there. The most talent is in that footprint.
Southeast.
Texas, Florida in particular, and then Georgia has become the 1970s and 80s Ohio and Pennsylvania is what Georgia's become. So it's right after California, Texas, and Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Mississippi, and Louisiana per capita turn out as many 4 and 5 stars than anybody in the country. Again, per capita based on the population. So it's the SEC just has an inherent advantage, and it's huge. On top of that, they care enough, and I don't want to offend anybody out there. When I say they care, I'm not talking about emotionally, that we can't rate, but their care translates exactly to resources and money. They put more resources and money than any conference in the country. The Big Ten has like a top half that matches the SEC, but even the Vanderbilts and the Ole Misses and the Arkansas, they are football factories. They put serious money. Somebody has to lose the games. So when they play each other, so somebody has to lose the games. So you don't see that kind of commitment at Illinois, Rutgers, and those type of schools. You're starting to see it at Northwestern, in particular in Minnesota. But so I think while the recruiting footprint is more and more working against the Big Ten, the conference has done a nice job of hiring quality coaches, of building great facilities recently at places like Minnesota and Northwestern in particular. And they're fighting an uphill battle, but they're doing a nice job. And those two are I've said it here many times and cited many sources. One of my most recent ones was an individual that I spoke with in the industry that's in charge of digital media for one of the major networks. He said the SEC and the Big Ten bring the most eyeballs to our site, and it's not even close. I think that Big 12 was awful 4 or 5 years ago. And I think the conference has done a nice upturn, obviously led by Texas, even though they're not completely back, but they're on the threshold. And
they're definitely trending.
Yeah, they're definitely trending. And TCU has made a nice adjustment into the Big 12. They got through a couple rough years, and now they're back to being a top 15 to 25 program as well. The Pac-12 is just reeling right now.
Oh yeah, I mean, from a revenue standpoint and every other thing. I mean, hopefully, Mario can do his thing over there in Oregon, work his magic. I mean, you want to give a guy like Chip Kelly the benefit of the doubt in UCLA, but I mean, they got some serious problems going over there.
Now, Ramon, fortunately, I got a contribution on the super chat from DeAndre before I cut on the ACC. I don't think the ACC is in bad shape long term, but right now the conference is awful. But I don't think that's going to stay that way. I think Florida State and Miami just have too many players in their backyard, too much talent, too many resources, and care too much about football for that to stay that way. And then you've got a few wild cards out there like a North Carolina that certainly they've invested in football. They got themselves a top flight head coach. I don't know how much he's going to be on top of his game at this point in his career. And then you've got the Louisvilles and North Carolina States that are usually decent. And of course, Louisville's fallen apart, but I think they made a nice hire.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm a really big fan of Satterfield. I think he's a hard-nosed coach. I mean, if you look at the way, now I'm a Hurricane fan. If you look at the way that Satterfield has organized the program over there in Appalachian State, they play hard-nosed football. They great defensive effort. They're gonna ground and pound you to death with a solid, balanced attack. And I just really think that, like, Scott Satterfield is one of those guys who's going to get it going. I like the energy of Jeff Collins that he brings over there at Georgia Tech. So I definitely think the conference is trending up.
So Ramon, I will say, and I'll put myself in this classification as well, there are very few visionaries in this world. It is difficult to be a visionary and see something out there that has yet to have any trace of substance yet. And so basically what I just gave you is basically a continuance of the same trajectory that we're seeing right now. If there would be any kind of turn in this, so to give you something else to go on, I would think that the ACC has the most potential because of where they're located, much like the SEC, the three-quarters of the conference is located in the southeastern portion of the country, and with Florida State and Miami both being down, and that's what really hurts the conference, and both of them get on their game, then the ACC has the most potential. So, DeAndre, are you listening to this? The ACC has the most potential to win big and challenge the SEC.
Well, yeah, definitely. And one more coach I want to name over there in the ACC is Dino Babers. I'm a big Dino Babers fan. I mean, he's a guy. I'm only talking about in one aspect. I compare him to Art Browse in the fact that if he can just get it to the point where they're recruiting in the low 30s, they have potential to do great things.
And they could probably do that. New Jersey has excellent football talent. New York's is okay. So they have to be a bit creative, but they're not far from Ohio. They're right above Pennsylvania. If they could make some inroads, and they're not going to steal players from Penn State and Ohio State at that level, but like you say, get into the recruiting rankings in the 30s as opposed to the 50s and the 60s that they've been in. I'm intrigued to see how well they're going to do over the next couple of years because, of course, we're going to see whether this 10-3 2018 was an aberration or whether Dino Babers is actually going to be able to sustain that.
Right. I mean, there's no doubt he's a great offensive mind, but is he a CEO that can put a program on the map altogether?
Absolutely. All right, Ramon.
The last person I want to talk about is.
Yeah. What else you got?
The last person I want to talk about real fast is obviously my guy, Manny Diaz. You know, he brings a lot of energy and hype to the program with his, with his ability as a defensive guy and a high energy guy. I'm pretty sure you've said something about him before, but I just kind of want to get your take on him real fast.
So my take on Manny Diaz is that for them, meaning Miami, to bypass more experienced coaches out there, not a lot, but there's a handful, and to reel him back in from another school speaks volumes to exactly what you're saying. They know what they had with him as defensive coordinator, and they just see him as the heir apparent and the guy. And I always think that that's the best hire that a big program can make, is to see the next guy, not to hire the retread, but to see the next guy that's the up and comer, that's got the energy and the vision and can energize the program. And Manny Diaz obviously is proven to be expert on one side of the ball, and he will look to others, Dan Enos, as of right now, to correct the other side of the ball and oversee it. And I got to think that he connects well to young people. And that's key, of course, in recruiting. And he should be able to, you don't need to do an excellent job in recruiting if you just hold your ground, stand your ground in South Florida and get half those guys, not even half those guys. I've seen the numbers. The numbers are ridiculous. Even if you wanted to sign and had the ability to sign every 4 and 5 star in that, I forget what the area is, it's like 3 to 4 counties, you wouldn't even have enough scholarships to sign all of them. You don't even have enough scholarships. You would have to let some of them go. So get half of them